Welcome to This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief. I'm Lauren Denise, just your average millennial out here trying to have a conversation about a taboo topic that nobody wants to talk about. It's important to know that grief doesn't just happen when you lose someone. It can happen at any moment in your life. And it doesn't have to be all bad. It can actually be a really beautiful process. And as a millennial who had to process her own grief, I knew it was important to bring a more lighthearted, fresh perspective and create a safe space to discuss a topic that is typically uneasy. As I always like to say, we like to talk about the real of grief, the whole grief, and nothing but the grief. This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief, starts now. Hey, you guys. Welcome back. Welcome to season 3. I'm so excited to be back talking to you guys. As you see, we got a little facelift. We changed the title still This Too Shall Suck podcast. I just added a subtitle on there, changed the theme song out, and changed the logo a little bit. So I'm super hyped. If you follow me on Instagram, you see I've been doing reels and we did an amazing giveaway while I was on break. So just excited to be here with you guys this season to be talking about it. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. As you heard in the theme song, I really just wanted to create a safe space to talk about grief. It's just such a taboo topic that nobody wants to talk about. And so I wanted to bring a millennial perspective because I had to process my own grief. So if this is your first time here, again, welcome. Go back and listen to episode 1. And I'll talk a little bit about my grief journey. I'm actually going to have a full episode this season talking about the grief of losing parents because, I think I've touched on it a little bit, but I really haven't dove into it and those feelings associated with it. But go back and listen to episode 1. I just explained a little bit about who Lauren Denise is and my journey on grief and why I created this amazing platform. So thank you guys for being patient with me. Thank you guys for continuing to come back and rock with me. And again, if this is your first time here, thank you for being here. Whether a friend shared it with you, whether you just found me, on the chart somewhere on Google, shout out to SEO. I'm just excited to have you here. And so I really wanted to open up the season, just with something powerful, something that my friends and I have been talking about. So we're going to be diving into estate planning today. And so you're probably like, Lauren, what are you even talking about? So when you think of estate planning, or let me say this, when I first thought of estate planning, I had no idea what that meant because, you think of estate. I'm like, I don't have an estate. I don't have an apartment. Like I don't have all that stuff, right? That was, just my ignorance in the subject of not knowing what it is or what it meant. But let me tell you guys, when my dad passed away in August of 2019, right? I am currently still in the probate process, trying to close the probate out. I literally have been arguing with creditors. The lawyers are ridiculous. Like it's been a whole situation because he didn't have a will set up. He didn't have all the things that he needed set up for the estate. So it was a whole process. And thankfully, what I will say, me and my siblings were on the same page because I've just heard horror stories of people who were not on the same page or they just had like estranged family members or bitter baby mamas, just all types of crazy stuff, right? And so it is so important. And my friends and I have been talking about it recently. And so I knew it was important to bring professional on to talk about it because I think, again, I'll say specifically for millennials, I know a lot of us are like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, how do I even do it? Like, I don't have a lot of money or yes, I have kids, but so it's just a lot of different things that you don't know what you don't know, right? And the more you know, the more you grow. So I knew it was important to bring somebody on. And so the guest I'm going to bring on, her name is Stephanie Anderson. She is adorable. She is wonderful. I actually met her at a workshop that I was helping out on. And I told her from the moment, I just loved her energy and I loved the information that she gave. And so I knew I wanted to bring it to you all to just talk about it so that you can have yourself set up in the event that something happens to you. And it doesn't have to be gruesome. Like when when you listen to it, we were laughing a lot. And so if this is your first time here, you're probably like, you're listening to a grief podcast, but I'm just telling you again, when I say a lighthearted approach, I laugh a lot. I'm cracking up a lot. That is just my personality and my energy. And that's the energy that I want to bring to this topic so we can normalize it. What's the hashtag? Normalize grief. let's just normalize it because it is going to happen at some point in our lives. And we just have to be able to work through it and deal with it. And so I knew it was something important to bring. So I'm super excited for you guys to hear this conversation. But I wanted to give you guys some quick facts about estate planning so you can understand kind of why it's so important and why I wanted to bring her on. So I got this information from a website called caring.com, and caring.com is really for like caregivers, people who are taking care of like their elders and things like that. And so they actually did a survey. So they did a survey recently in 2021 about wills, and it showed 1 out of 2 younger adults were prompted by COVID-19 to engage in estate planning. And so the age range was between 18 and 34. So that's crazy, right? Because so much was happening in 2020. And so like now 1 out of 2 younger adults is like, listen, we need to get it together, because if 2020 taught us a lot. Let's just be clear. 2020 taught us a lot. But if it didn't teach us anything, it's that we need to be prepared for anything, and that life is too short. And so 1 out of 2 younger adults was prompted by that to go ahead and start planning their estate. And then they also did another survey and found out that younger adults are more likely to have a will than middle-aged adults. So think about that. Think about how like crazy that is. So if you think about this age range of 18 to 34, right? Anybody, there's basically saying like middle age, like maybe 40s to 50s, maybe even 60s, right? They're saying that we're more likely to have a will than our parents. Isn't that wild? So just imagine, like, our parents are aging, right? Like if you're in your 20s or 30s, like your parents are aging. Like my parents would have been 63 and 64, right? So they're aging. And so imagine, God forbid, something happens to them and they don't have a will set up. They don't have their estate set up. And you have to deal with all that. And let me tell hello, first here, I am a prime example. That's not what you want to do. So if I would honestly like go to your parents after you listen to this episode and ask them, do they have their estate set up? Because now you can actually start having some conversations with them to say, well, mom and dad, you need to get your estate set up. You're getting older. Like, we need to think about what would happen. Like, if you can't take care of yourself, things like that, because people assume like estate is just when you pass away. No, what if you're in a place where you can't take care of yourself anymore and you can't make decisions? That you have to have these things in place. And so that was like really kind of eye-opening to me to like, wow, like, well, obviously it was eye-opening for me because my dad didn't have his, but like if you're listening to this and your parents are getting older, even if they're not getting older, I would have a serious conversation, ask them, what does their estate plan look like? And then so I say that to say that even after that survey, still 2 out of 3 young adults still don't have a will. So it prompted more adults. It prompted 1 out of 2 to go and, start their estate planning. And then, they found out that younger adults are more likely to have a will than their middle-aged, what's the word I'm looking for? Middle-aged, I'll just say parents. Middle-aged comrades, whatever. But still 2 out of 3 don't have a will. So that is just crazy to me. And we're going to get into why that is so important. And so they wanted to know the reasons why. And so the top 4 reasons were they don't know how, which that is a real thing. Like literally me and my friends were just having a conversation in our group chat. And they were like, I don't even know where to start. Do I just type in wills in Georgia? And luckily I was able to give them Stephanie's information because obviously, I've been in the process. But a lot of people just don't know how because, again, it's something we don't talk about. And this is why we got to normalize these things so we can start having these real life conversations. The second reason is they feel like it's too expensive to set up. And again, Stephanie's going to get into that and the steps and all of that. But that's the second reason why. The third reason is they don't feel they have enough assets to leave anyone. And that is a real life thing. And Stephanie and I talked about that in the interview as well. Like people are like, oh, well, I just have this and I don't have that. And none of that matters because you still have stuff regardless. And another thing, and I'm going to say this with the most love as possible. Let's normalize not having GoFundMes for funerals. Okay. Let's not. Let's all normalize getting life insurance. Let's start there. And we can actually finish there. And the last reason, or I guess really the first reason, because it was the biggest thing, is they just haven't gotten around to it. And again, same conversation that my friends and I were having in the group chat. They're like, yeah, I've been saying I was going to do it. Like, but we keep putting it off. And I keep bringing it to the forefront. I'm like, y'all, get it done. Dad's been passed away for this long. I'm still doing this. Like, please get it done. Right. And so it's just really important. And so I thought it was just really necessary to bring her on. And she just has such an amazing energy and amazing spirit. So I'm super excited for you guys to hear our conversation and for you all to start having those conversations with your loved ones, with your friends, with your parents, with whoever, so we can like really have ourselves together. Like that is the whole premise of me doing this podcast, is to help people heal and to help people just put themselves in the position to be better in life. And so I'm really excited for you guys to hear the conversation with Stephanie and I. Stephanie C. Anderson is the managing attorney of the Anderson Law Practice, LLC, a boutique Atlanta law firm in Buckhead focusing exclusively on legacy creation, asset protection, and the efficient transfer of generational wealth. Since graduating from law school a decade ago, Stephanie has gained a substantial amount of experience in and out of the courtroom. After experiencing firsthand how the lack of planning can impact a family, Stephanie decided to transition her practice from helping people when there's a problem to helping them avoid problems altogether. She opened this practice because of the love she has for her family and enjoys working with people who have those same values. The majority of her practice is helping families plan for the future, but Stephanie's unique background arms her with the confidence and knowledge to move forward with litigation and representing individuals in court if necessary. This background is helpful for clients when it comes to probate matters. She understands that sometimes probate cases could become difficult and believes an attorney should be capable of helping clients if things take a turn for the worse. She is a proud native of Decatur, Georgia, and a graduate of Southwest DeKalb High School. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with her family and friends, live music, dancing, and traveling. She is a former cheerleader for the Atlanta Falcons and Atlanta Hawks and is a huge Atlanta sports fan. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first guest in season 3, Miss Stephanie Anderson. Woo!
Hey.
Hey, girl. Child, we gonna try not to laugh this whole interview. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. Like I told you the moment I met you, I was like, oh my God, her energy. Yep, need her.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Of course. And just thank you for all the work that you're doing. You know, I was sharing with them that like I'm going through this probate process, like I shared with you before, and it's been coming up on 2 years, you know, but my dad didn't have a will. He didn't have all the things that you need. So it's been a process nonetheless.
Yes.
And so I was like, no, I have to bring her on. You know, I talk to my friends about it all the time, making sure they have their, you know, just estate together. So with that being said, what I wanted to do first is just talk a little bit about your story with grief. I know you had your own story when it came to it, and that's why you got into it. But I want people to know your story and, you know, why you have such a passion behind doing the estate planning.
So before I made the transition to estate planning, I was an attorney representing corporations and insurance companies, right? So, totally different type of law,
right?
At first. And, what ended up happening is a few years after, you know, graduating from law school, you know, having this real job, paying bills,
right?
All that stuff was happening. What ended up happening after that was that my aunt, ended up having a severe stroke. And this was the aunt that if I was hungry in law school, I could go to her house, you know, type of situation. And she ended up having a really severe stroke that left her incapable of communicating anymore, handling her own affairs. It was just devastating. And one of those things that just kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when people are thinking of estate planning, you know, they think about, well, what happens to my stuff when I die? But then there's a whole nother component to estate planning of, well, what happens if I get sick? And so it was just one of those situations where a light bulb went off for me because, you know, unfortunately, there wasn't any type of documentation in place as far as, you know, letting the world know who she wanted to communicate these decisions, handle business, do those type of things for her. And with that came a lot of confusion. You know, for me, light bulb went off. I wanted to make sure my parents had what they needed. You know, do I have what I need? And that's kind of how the journey of, as far as, making that transition to estate planning began. So it wasn't it was a different type of grief. It was grieving the aunt that was, she was still here, but just not who I remembered her being, and knowing that she was in a position where she needed us, but it wasn't clear who she wanted to handle that business. Yeah. And that opened that door for me and definitely led to that transition. And it's been one of the best decisions
I love it
that I've made. Yeah.
No, I love that. I absolutely love that. Oh God, you said the aunt that was. Oh, that in my heart. Because it's different. I tell people and people who know my dad, it was just different. Like he was always loud and just, boisterous and commanded the room. And then, it got to a point where he couldn't go to the bathroom by himself. He couldn't walk. Right. And, it's like, that's not who I grew up with. Like you said, like this is not the aunt whose house I'm going to. So it's just a whole different beast. And so, can you talk about, I think people hear the word estate planning and they're like, well, I don't have a house or I don't have an estate. So can you just talk about kind of a high level overview, or you can go as deep as you like on what estate planning actually means?
So estate planning is not a number or a figure, right? If you're alive, right, you have something that needs to be planned, just period, point blank. It doesn't matter how much it is or how much you don't think you have. There are things, right, that need to be addressed, whether it's a situation you're alive, but just incapacitated, or at the point that you pass away. I always tell people it's not the estates that are these high net worth estates it's not those usually where I find like there's a lot of drama around. Mm-hmm. It's the, middle class family, right? Yep. Where, it's where those end up being situations where there can be so much infighting and so much confusion that a good bit of that quote unquote estate is used to pay for the lawyers or, to fight that battle.
Right.
So I always tell folks, estate planning is what we know of it, but I like to call it legacy planning. That's really what it is. I mean, you don't have to have a house is not the checkbox, right? You can do this type of planning without owning any real estate, right? Because there are other matters that still need to be planned out. So it's bigger than property. It's bigger than money. It can be as simple as who's going to communicate to the doctors if I can't? How do I feel about life support? Do I want to be an organ donor or not? It's having the consideration and the love for your family to plan out some of the hardest decisions. So you're not putting the burden on them to come up or to figure out, well, this is what mom wanted, or I think this is what dad wanted. No, you've made it very clear what you want to happen. And so that's really what it is. That's really what it is.
No, that's good. That's good. Like you said, it's not about the house. Okay. So if you're listening, because you probably like, because I have an apartment. So there's probably people listening like, well, I don't have a house. And I think that's, like you said, that's not the checkbox for it. And I think that's the misconception. And so thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate that. So I want to kind of piggyback off that a little bit. What about those people? And then we'll, go the opposite way. What about those people who are single and are like, well, I don't have like kids or anything like that. Like me, I don't have any kids, I'm not married or anything like that. I obviously know the importance of estate planning, but for those who don't, why is it still important for you, even if you're single, no kids, not married, to have a plan when it comes to your estate?
So I feel like with single people, it's even more imperative to have a plan because there's no natural order of things, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Right. So many of my clients that are single, sometimes, they want their friends their bestie to be the person to make these decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since that's not the natural order of things, right? The only way we can make that happen is if you write it out.
Yeah.
So it's very important, right, to make that happen in that context, because like I said, there's no, okay, this makes sense. No, when you're single, it's not going to make any sense. A lot of times you're going to have or want to involve people in your plan that are not blood relatives, which is totally fine. But the only way we can make that happen is by writing that out.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. And it's the same with beneficiaries, right? So you might not have a spouse, you might not have any children, but we do need to think about, well, the stuff that you do have, who do we want it to go to? It doesn't have to be a family member. It can be a friend. It can be an organization. It can be a cause. It's even more important to kind of think through legacy, I think, when you're single, right? So, are there things that you want to go to an organization or a church or a cause, right? Things like that you can think through and write out and make sure that it's going to be followed out.
No, that's
so,
good. Ooh,
that's
good. No, that's good. I mean, because people be out here like, well, I don't have no kids. But see, like, I think you made an important point, and it may not even be anything to dive into like that, but you said that it doesn't have to be blood. It could be a friend. So I guess the process is the same when it comes to a friend, right? Or does it need to be a little different? How have you seen that handled when it's not necessarily a family member who, whether they're married or, hopefully it's your spouse, but I don't, PT just on, have you seen that be, I guess, an issue, like, for people? They come and it's their friend, and the sister's like, really?
So here's the challenge sometimes with planning, is that a lot of people feel compelled to include family members, right? But me, as the attorney, my advice is we want to pick the right people, regardless if they're blood or not, right? So do not feel compelled to include someone in your plan just because they're blood. I mean, blood doesn't always equate family. Let's just be all the way real, So, especially we're talking about, handling stuff like finances.
Okay.
I mean, there's some blood relatives out there we might not trust to do any of that kind of stuff. And that's totally okay.
And that is fine. Because it's a couple of them. I'm like, oh no, you will not. Exactly. You will never get this PIN number.
And see, that's where it becomes, I think that raises such a good point about the importance of writing your intentions down. Because let's say it was a situation where, you became incapacitated, right? Mm-hmm. And you couldn't go to the bank. You couldn't pay your bill, right? But you didn't have a financial power of attorney in place. So who is going to be handling those affairs for you? And you better believe what's going to end up happening is that the courts are always going to give preference to your blood relative.
Right.
Right? You might not want that, but guess what? You're no longer in a position to say what you want to happen, because now you're incapacitated. You didn't write anything out. And now the courts are going to appoint who they think is going to be best in that position. And a lot of times they are going to appoint blood relatives. So that could be problematic if you know the real, like if you understand the background.
Right.
But you're not in a position to communicate that due to incapacity. I mean, the courts always are going to give preference to family, right? Until they know better.
Yeah.
So... and some of us don't have that kind of room in our state for that kind of error. Right?
Yeah.
Something happens, we're done. Child, it's over. There is no
bank account on zero when you wake up from whatever you're going through.
Exactly.
Bank account drained. Be like, well, did my bill? Why don't I have a house? Child, I have seen it all. So, yes. Oh my gosh, yes, that is so. Listen, so as she said, don't feel compelled to add that cousin them just because they may feel away. Because at the end of the day, What matters is what you want and what you need, okay?
Look,
Because,
I
baby.
have seen it. That financial power of attorney specifically, that it's a really important document to have in your estate plan.
It is.
But when I say someone can do some damage with that particular document, because it's really like a blank check.
Correct.
I mean, you're basically saying this person can handle my life.
Literally, yes. Add them to my bank account. Like I was on all my dad's bank accounts. Like you said, I could go and write a check and just say, Dennis Wellman in care of, Lauren. Like, yeah, you can do essentially whatever you want with it.
Exactly.
And if
so
you don't do it right,
if you wouldn't trust that person with a blank check, you should not trust them as your financial power of attorney.
And boop. Okay. Well, we can end the interview here. Thanks, guys. But no, that is a real. I tell people, I'm like, listen, if I can't give you my PIN number for my debit card now, you think when I'm past? Oh, please. No. No.
Right. Exactly.
If I can't trust you when I'm living to go get my money? No. Oh, no. Right. Absolutely not. That is so funny. Absolutely not. So let's talk about, the people who are married. And we talked about this a little on the workshop. So I wanted to bring it up because I thought it was really, it was really interesting. And my sister and I talked about it because she has a blended family. So for those people who are in blended families, I know something you specifically talked about was like their kids, like, I guess the biological kids, and then maybe the kids that you say with your spouse, and how you can kind of or technically leave out your kids who are not from your husband or wife if you don't write it right. So I want to talk about that because I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. It can get really tricky. And so the first thing is, with blended families is be very clear about the intention. Right. So if the intention happens to my spouse, I want everything to go to my spouse. That's fine. But what happens when something happens to your spouse? Right? Is it your intent to make that distribution a part of their estate, which means their biological children are now the beneficiaries of that money? So it's important to think really clearly about what you want to happen. If it's a situation where you're fine with your spouse benefiting, but you want to make sure your biological children benefit after your spouse passed away, then we need to make sure that's very clear. But if we just leave it at everything goes to my spouse, well, guess what? Now what you've left is a part of their estate. Right. And it could be a situation where their biological children, right, now inherit what you've left them, and your biological children are inadvertently left out. So there are ways that we can plan around that. One of the ways that we can do that is to basically distribute the spouse's portion, right? So whoever's the first to pass away, make it to where that person's quote unquote share distribution goes into a trust, right? And then through that trust, we say that at that time that they pass, it goes to your biological children.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Right. So I told, estate planning, if you're like me, and I'm not afraid to admit that I can be a control freak. And so
also same.
It's a great way to kind of still be in the mix, even though you're no longer here. You can
control.
Still pull the strings a little bit about, same way with remarriage. Like if I have couples, I have to have that uncomfortable conversation. Okay, y'all are married, everything's great. But what happens if something happens to one of you and the survivor gets remarried? Do we need to put some protections around that to make sure boo number 2, right, is not necessarily benefiting from what you've done?
Chile,
right?
Chile. I can go all day about that.
So yeah, we definitely want, the survivor to be happy. And if that includes remarriage, great. But we also want to make sure that we're planning in a way that we're protecting that inheritance really for the children, right? Really for the children. So many things to think through when we're talking about married couples, specifically about blended families or families that could potentially be blended.
Right. Because let me tell you that, let's see, how shall I say this so it doesn't sound that benefiting off of the surviving spouse and the other person benefiting off of it. I saw that firsthand. And it's a real life thing. So if if you're not listening, I'm telling you, Lauren Denise is telling you firsthand. I saw it happen with my own eyes. God bless my father. Ooh, wonderful human being. But my mother was the one who was, taking care of the money and things like that. And I just saw how he handled it. And people who were coming to his life and how they were, technically benefiting off of it. So that's a real life, I guess, concern is the only word that I can think of.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. Cause so what else, for, not blended families, what else should married couples think about when they're going into estate planning that maybe they wouldn't necessarily think about? Of course, they'll think about a will and, like you said, financial, maybe a medical directive. Is there anything else that, they probably should think about that they typically don't think about when it comes to estate planning?
One thing that people don't really think about unless they've been through it themselves is, how do I want to plan my estate? So, I think most people know about a last will and testament. And, really the purpose of it is to appoint, the executor, so the person that's going to be in charge of the administration, and then who you want the beneficiaries of the estate to be, right? Spell that out. But I always tell people, it's not like the movies and TV shows where you go into the lawyer's office after your loved one has passed away and there's this dramatic reading
it is
of
not
the
like
will.
that at all, child.
They have this box and they start distributing stuff from the will. Like,
you start getting a check tomorrow. This is not BAPS. This is not BAPS, everyone. Calm down. Okay.
So there's a whole court process that we've got to go through, right, in order to submit the will for probate, officially appoint the executor, give people the opportunity to contest the will, giving notice to creditors, giving them time to file claims. Like, it's this long process. So one thing that not just couples, anyone, right, kind of needs to think through is, well, what do I want this process to look like for my loved ones when I'm gone?
Yep.
Right? Is probate the best way? Should I plan in a way that can avoid that? Right? So planning is important. The other step is, well, what do I want this to look like, right, for them? What do I want this process to look like? What do I want them to have to go through, right, in order to get access to these assets or bank accounts or house? So that's a huge consideration. And usually the first big consideration that I'll have people kind of think through before we start planning anything. Do we need to avoid that?
Yeah.
Do we need to avoid probate?
Yeah. And so can we talk a little bit about that? I know we've said it, a couple times. And again, obviously we know, but I don't think people necessarily know when you say probate, what does that mean? Because like you said, they associate it with, we come in and he's leaving. I literally always think about BAPS. And when they came into that room and he left all that money and the darn nephew walks off, like, I always think about that. It's not like that, everyone. I wish it was, but unfortunately it is not. My mom had a will and it was not like that. Don't worry. So, so when you say probate, what does that mean? Just for those people who are listening and not quite for sure what that means when we say that.
So probate, the best way I can explain it is it's basically the court oversight, right, of the administration of the estate. So there's several steps to this, whether you have a will or not, right? So really what the will do when it comes to this process called probate you've made it very clear who you want the executor to be and who you want the beneficiaries to be, right? You spelled that out in your will.
Mm-hmm.
And so the difference when you pass away without one is that anyone can petition the court to be the administrator of the estate, and the beneficiaries are determined by state law. So it's usually based off the family tree. But probate is a court process, right? So there's paperwork that has to be filed with the court to start the process,
Mm-hmm.
right? The administrator has to officially be appointed by the court. The executor of the will has to officially be appointed by the court. We have to give beneficiaries or any heirs an opportunity, if there's a will, to contest the will. There doesn't have to even be a good reason to contest the will. It could be a situation where the person's like, they only left me this. Oh, he could not have been in his right mind to only have left me this. Right? We're going to stop this whole thing right now. We're stopping it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is usually what I see in my practice. It's not like there's this great reason. It's, oh, no, that's all I got? Or, oh, no, he named her as the executor? I think not. And they'll contest the will, and it just stops everything, right? So let's say we're in a situation where, no one's acting crazy. No one's contesting the will or anything like that. There is a court mandated process, right? We have to give creditors of the estate time to file claims and make sure that there's enough in the estate to pay them off first. Creditors have priority, and the court wants proof that the estate has paid these creditors,
Yes,
right?
They do. Yes, they do.
So once that happens, and that process takes a lot of time. Once that happens, then whatever is left goes to the heirs or beneficiaries of the estate, right? If there's a will pursuant to that, if there is no will pursuant to state law, then there's a process of closing the estate up. There's a final tax return. There's a whole bunch of different steps, right? To make sure that.
Yes, Lord. Look, clearly triggered right now. Sorry.
It's a lot. Now, imagine if it's an estate, right? These are just estates where no one's fighting. Everybody's like, okay, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Imagine how much time it can take for an estate where people are acting up.
Oof.
We're talking about years that, this could drag on, right? As far as any type of hearings, trials, all that kind of stuff to kind of figure out, well, is this a valid last will and testament? Is it not? Figuring out, is the judge even going to give the last will and testament anyway? I mean, it can be such a process. So, good examples, if you've never had to go through this process yourself, is to look at some of the celebrities and their estates that are still in this process, still going through this, like Prince.
Oh gosh.
Think about that. I mean, that is still very open. It's very much going on, right? That process of probating his estate is still very much happening, right? So think about that. And it's also a really good example of the public nature of probate, right? Mm-hmm. We can see what the person had, what they, we know who the heirs of the estate are, what they're getting. Whitney Houston's a really good example of that. She had a will, but because of the public nature of probate, right, we know how she left things to Bobby Christina. Sometimes that can leave a beneficiary open to predators.
Yep.
In the world, so that's another thing to think through. Are you comfortable having this process be public, or do we need to plan in a different way where we can bypass this process? So many different considerations when it comes to figuring out, is probate the way to go?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Listen, like she said, luckily for me and my siblings, we all agreed, like, okay, Lauren's going to be the administrator, and we just do whatever we need to do. But again, at this point, my dad passed away in August of 2019. Here we are in May of 2021, and we're just now about to close the estate. because it just takes a long time because like you got to wait for the creditors. Literally, the papers are at the court for them to close. A creditor sends a letter to my lawyer literally a week ago. And I'm like, oh, so now I'm arguing on the phone with this creditor for $500. Really? Y'all don't have nothing else to do? Like, but this is what happens. Like, honestly. And they even had to put it, you know, in the paper, because obviously, you know, like, okay, is there anyone else who basically feels like they have a right to Dennis Wellman's estate? And if, you know, we didn't that wasn't our problem. We were like, okay, like ain't nobody because we don't have any like estranged siblings or anything, but that could be a thing that could happen.
It is.
Like, literally, it is. And so I want to talk about this contesting because, again, Father God, thank you that wasn't our that wasn't our story. But what does that mean? Like when someone comes and contests, is it only a family member, or can it be like, you know, a strange wife, you know, a restaurant worker? I don't know. Like, I feel like there's scammers out there who would try and make that happen.
That is a great question. So let me tell you first kind of how this would even come to be. So what ends up happening is when there is a will, right, we have to give a copy of that will to anyone who would have inherited the estate had there not been one.
Oh,
okay. And so the courts are basically giving those people, right, an opportunity to contest it. So what I have seen, here are some examples of people that I have seen contest the will. I had a case where wife number 2,
wait a minute,
right, contested the will.
Did wife number 1 know it was a wife number 2?
So wife number 1 had, so this wife number 1 had passed. Right. He had children with wife number 1, ended up getting married to wife number 2, but left a minimal amount of his estate to wife number 2 and the bulk to his children from marriage number 1. She contested it. Right? So that's the kind of stuff that ends up happening is I'm not happy with what this person left me. I'm not happy that I wasn't named as the executor. Right? Those are those situations that I often see. Or there's, you know, with children, why did mom and dad give them more than me? So with situations like that, my advice is a lot of times you understand your family dynamic well before you're drafting your estate plan. Yeah. Okay. Let's just be all the way real.
Okay.
You know that your intention is to give wife number 2 the minimum and to give everything or give the bulk of your estate to your kids. And you already know how wife number 2 is because that's why you're only giving her a little bit.
Correct. Right.
Okay. So with that being said, when we have situations like this, or is the situation where you've got 3 kids and you've got to treat one differently for whatever reason, and you know that they're going to feel some kind of way about being treated differently. Those are special circumstances where I would say that a last will and testament is not going to suffice. And that you definitely need to plan your estate in a way that avoids probate. And so the way that you can do that, I mean, there's several different ways, but from a legal perspective, the way that you can do that is through a revocable living trust. Okay. And I say, I'm a huge advocate. Like, do not expect people to have like this kumbaya moment when you're gone.
Don't expect them to have sense because they don't. I promise they don't.
It's going to highlight the drama. It's going to make it so much worse. So if you are already on notice that someone could potentially act crazy, then you might want to consider planning the estate with a revocable living trust because it avoids probate altogether. It's a lot harder for someone to contest it. There is no court oversight, so it's a private process. Those are amazing vehicles for blended families. You know, marriages, second marriages, third marriages. No judgment here.
Okay.
You know, so more complex situations require more complex planning, and sometimes a last will and testament is just not going to suffice.
Listen,
yeah,
I didn't know about this revocable living trust, honey.
Yes.
They're powerful. Listen, I might have to put that right on in my plan here, okay? Just in case. Because I've seen it twice. People get to acting real crazy. But like I said, I'm just grateful that for me and my siblings, we were all on the same page. But I've heard horror stories, like you said, of people just being... I don't have a proper word, but just being terrible. That we're just going to keep it at that. Just being really, really terrible. And so the last question, I know I won't keep you all night, girl, but this is great. Honestly, you've just been dropping so many gems, and I know so many people are listening like, I never knew that. I don't even know if it could be what would you say is like a step by step? Because I know it's different for everybody, but what is, I guess, the basics you would say? Like if somebody's like, well, I feel like I don't need that because I only have an apartment and I only have, this. Like, what would you say to somebody who is like, well, I don't have a lot of assets. I only have a laptop or I only have my, these things. Like, what do you say to that person? So maybe this isn't the last question, JK. But what do you... Just kidding. When I tell people, I'm like, it's my show, my bad. What do you say to the person who feels like they don't have enough assets to even plan their estate?
Well, okay. Let me just say, I think, and I don't sell life insurance or anything like that, but everyone should have life insurance.
Agreed.
Everyone should have a life insurance policy.
First of all, I'm sorry to cut you off. If I see another GoFundMe for a funeral, I'm going to nut up. Y'all got to do better, okay?
Yes. It's depending on your age and your health, I mean, it really is easy
Agreed.
to do better, right? In that regard. So, and it's not as expensive as you would think. So, I think at a minimum, you might not have a lot of personal property. You might not have a home, but you definitely need some life insurance.
Yep.
And that is definitely a way to create some type of legacy, right? It's bigger than, and the life insurance policy should be bigger than making sure that your final expenses are paid for. Like, it should definitely be able to create some type of legacy, right?
Yeah.
For you and your family. So anyway, life insurance, if you don't have that, make that happen. And then as far as planning, right? First steps, like things to consider. It doesn't matter how much the person is worth when they come and talk to me. I always make everyone go through the same exercise. And that is organizing your life. Because you might actually be shocked at what you do have.
Right.
So start gathering these bank statements, brokerage accounts. If you have real property deeds, start organizing your financial life and start putting everything in one place. If something were to happen to you tomorrow, where would we start? Where would we even start? And so many times families are having to kind of do this, scavenger hunt after someone passed away, trying to put together the pieces. So you do that now. That's the first step for every single client that comes to our office is we give them a worksheet, start organizing, start putting your financial life on paper. It might surprise you what's out there. That's the first step, because honestly, that will help you decide, okay, well, what do I need? What legal documents do I actually need to put and to protect what's on this paper.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first step. No legal documents required. No need to talk to an attorney. Start organizing everything. Start organizing every aspect of your life, down to like what bills get paid every month and who do they go to.
Right.
Right. Just having all of that stuff organized is a great first step. That's really going to help you figure out, well, what level of planning do I need?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Because I will say that my mom, she wrote down, like, literally had this paper and it had all of the accounts and all of her passwords on there. And my dad started like adding to it. So it was good for us to get into it. But again, like you said, you know, it was definitely a scavenger hunt to try and find out who his life insurance was through, you know, whether it was through his job or whether, you know, they had accidental or, you know, it was definitely all hands on deck after he passed, like at the house, just trying to like getting on the phone with people. Like it was entertaining to say the least. Yeah. So that is, when I tell you that is so true. And I told somebody this weekend, I'm like, I have this file cabinet. I have to organize it. So thank you for just, you know, pushing me to do it again. So you were talking to me on that one. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate that, girl. I got you. All right. I got you. But okay, for real. Okay, for real. Last question. So what is, or what do you want the biggest takeaway for anybody who's listening, you know, to you? And like, what is the biggest takeaway that you want them to get from listening to this episode?
So if last year taught us anything, it is, oh my God.
Everything. Taught us everything.
So many lessons. But tomorrow is not promised. So many people, you know, they want to wait for the perfect time to kind of start having these conversations, but the perfect time is right now. Like it really, really is. And then guess what? If things change, you get more assets, you get married, you have kids, you get divorced, things are going to change. That's life. Then you update your plan to reflect what's going on in your life. But as far as waiting for the perfect time is when you're able to do it. And that's right now. So I wouldn't wait. I definitely wouldn't wait. Estate planning is a very loving act because, you know, it's not the most fun thing to think through some of these considerations and put this together. It's a very unselfish act. And it really shows how much someone cares about their loved ones and they're willing to kind of go through this exercise. So, but that's the biggest takeaway is that, you know, no need to wait. There's no perfect time. Do it now. Now is the perfect time.
Come on now. That's a soundbite right there. Now is the perfect time. Boom. Got my soundbite. All right. No, that is good. That is funny. No, that is good. Well, thank you, Stephanie, so much again for being here. Like, God, when I see so many gems, I'm like, listen, I'm like, wait, you get what to do? And I've been in the probate process for so long at this point, but there's just so many things that I just didn't know because, again, like we just weren't able to have these conversations, you know, with him before he passed. And so, you know, now I have these conversations with my friends all the time. You know, we're in our 30s having these conversations. And I tell everybody, I scream from the rooftop, I'm like, please have your stuff in order because these creditors, these lawyers, these fees, it's just like the amount of money we've spent from the estate just on just crap, I'll say, is crazy. So thank you so much for being here. If people want to reach out to you, y'all reach out to her. Now, first of all, do you only work with people in Atlanta or can anyone reach out to you?
So we work with people in Georgia, and if it's a situation where you reach out to us and we can't help you, then we've got a network of other estate planning lawyers too. So we can always point you in the right direction.
Great. Asking for myself. So Just wondering, because I'm like looking around at these people in Ohio and I'm like, maybe I'll just come back to Atlanta for about a week, get with Steph. We good. Nobody will know. Go back home. But let me stop for them to be like, girl, all right. So where can they reach out to you at if they have any questions or if they want to work with you and your firm?
So we've got a lot of resources on our website. So the website is atletaplanning.com. So ATL like Atlanta, atletaplanning.com. Whole bunch of great blogs. We have some resources on that website. There's a way to contact us and to book some time to talk with me too through that site. So lots of resources and the best way to get in contact with us.
Perfect. And do you have any social media that they can follow you on?
We're on Facebook under the Anderson Law Practice.
Perfect. So y'all follow her. Y'all go to her website. She does have some good blogs and resources. Are you going to be doing workshops again soon, do you think?
Yeah, you know what? COVID has shown us that we don't have to do them in person.
Okay. Zoom it is.
Yes, we will be doing webinars for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. So,
yes.
Yeah, we will.
She did a good webinar. That's how we met, was
right.
doing a webinar. So they are very good, clearly. So they are good. Well, thank you again, Stephanie. This is absolutely amazing. I know you're going to help so many people. So I really, really appreciate you being here, girl.
Thank you for having me.
This week's episode is sponsored by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. Number one, it is free. That means no monthly subscriptions, no hidden fees. It is free 99. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. So you don't have to buy all this equipment that I decided to buy. You can do it right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. So it's so easy for me to upload an episode and it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. And you can actually make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And let's get into the show. So good. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Stephanie. Again, I just love her energy and she's just so knowledgeable and I mean, honestly dropped so many gems. So I won't be long, but I'm going to be strong. Where did I hear that from? I think I heard that on Instagram with this girl. What'd she say? It's Friday. I'm going to find it and I'm going to post it on my Instagram. So make sure y'all are following me at this Two Shots Like podcast because I'm going to post it. And if you know what it is, send it to me because I literally cannot remember. She said, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to figure it out either way. But something that I just wanted to kind of reiterate of what she said is even if you don't, have you don't have to talk to a lawyer tomorrow, but like get your things in order, like get your files in order. That's why I kept telling her you're talking to myself. Like literally I've been like, okay, Lauren, like get all your passwords down, like get all your paperwork in order, like get all these things in order. Like I literally have a file cabinet over here that I'm literally staring at that it just needs to be organized. Because at the end of the day, if something is to happen, where do people need to go? They can go to that file cabinet and it says like estate and it'll be like, okay, boom, we know, pull this out and everything is there. So if you are listening to this, I urge you to just start there. Just start getting your stuff in order, start filing it, start putting all your passwords down, start putting all maybe your bank account information down, all of those different things that you need to do, like go ahead and put those down so that by the time that you do go to an estate lawyer, start your estate planning, then you're able to like have these things in one place. And again, now you're able to have these conversations with family or friends, whoever, your executor administrator is going to be to say like, hey, if anything ever happens, this is where all of my stuff is. So I really just wanted to reiterate that specific point. I mean, she has so many different things, but like that specific point of just getting your things in order, because I can tell you, it was a literal scavenger hunt for all of the things like the life insurance and all that for my dad. Like literally the day that he died, there were so many people at my house, as you can imagine. And we all were just like looking for this paperwork. I was on the phone with people. Like it was a madhouse. Like it was a madhouse. Because, you know, my mom was the one who was super organized and had her files and things like that. And so it's just important to get all that together. So definitely like make sure all of your things are together. Like take the time over the weekend or take just like some, you know, maybe like 30 minutes out the week every day to like get that stuff organized. Like if you don't take anything else away from this episode, get your stuff organized, because even if you don't have a will and something happens tomorrow, at least somebody knows where your stuff is and where to start. So they're not in a mad rush to look for everything, because let me tell you, like the different emotions that you're going through when someone passes away, like you already have to deal with those. And then now, depending on who the person is, you're trying to plan. It's just a whole type of situation that you never want to leave to your family. Let me tell you, because it's not cute at all. It's not cute at all. And so I really hope you guys got some really good gems and some really good talking points for whoever it is that you're going to talk to, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a significant other, whether it's a sibling, family, friend, whoever it is. I really hope that you guys took this and have some really good talking points to begin the discussions, and reach out to Stephanie. Like she said, even if you're not in Georgia, you can reach out to her and say like, hey, I'm in. And I told her, I said, listen, I would love to work, and Stephanie knows I would love to work with her, but obviously, you know, I'm in Ohio and so I can't work with her. And so she's like, oh, okay, well, let me reach out to some people there, you know, who I can put you in contact with. Right. And so that's the biggest thing, is like, reach out to her and just say, hey, I live in, you know, South Africa, because I'm like, oh, here, hey, you know, but like, I don't know where to begin. You know, I don't know what that looks like. Or maybe even have conversations with your friend group. You know, you never know, like, who knows who, right? So start having those conversations. Let's normalize having our estates plan. Let's normalize having life insurance. Let's normalize, you know, having wills. Let's normalize having living trust. Let's normalize not leaving our family in disarray if something were to happen to us. Like, honestly, I think that's the biggest takeaway, is let's normalize not leaving our families in disarray if something were to happen to us. Because let me tell you, it definitely can be disarray if you do not have it set up properly. But as you're going through the process, as I always say, again, if this is your first time here, something I always say to people, give yourself grace, be kind to yourself, because if you don't, who will? Thank you guys so much for listening to season 3, episode 1 of This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief. If you haven't already, follow me on social media at This Too Shall Suck podcast on Facebook and on Instagram. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please don't forget to rate, review, and follow, and share this with your family and friends. If you want to know more about me, Lauren Denise, check me out on my website at thistooshallsuckpodcast.com, and feel free to send me any questions or topics you want to hear at hello@thistooshallsuckpodcast.com. This episode and every episode was produced by Mike Sick, and our original music is produced by Jimmy Samaj. As always, I love you guys, and I'm sending you love and light in your life because you deserve it. I'll see you on the next episode. Mwah.